It was February 2017, and I had been married to Rachel for 8 months. She worked as a furniture designer and had to attend a trade show in Florida for the weekend. I was going to be alone at the house. I drove her to the airport that morning, and after a quick goodbye, I returned to our quiet, secluded home, expecting a peaceful weekend. But things, as they often do, didn't turn out as planned. Our house was situated in a rural area, far from the nearest neighbor, about 800 to 900 meters away. Rachel and I had chosen this place for its tranquility, wanting to live away from the noise and bustle of city life. It was just what we wanted: quiet, peaceful, and private. But that evening, I began to feel something wasn't quite right. It was nearing midnight. I had dinner and was watching TV, trying to keep my mind busy. I had just decided to go upstairs to grab my phone from the bedroom when I noticed something odd. As I walked past the window, I looked outside, and there, standing in the shadow of a tree, was a man. His face was covered by a mask, but his eyes, dark and cold, were staring right at me. The blood drained from my face. I froze for a moment, not believing what I was seeing. Without thinking, I screamed and bolted toward the door, locking it behind me. I had watched enough horror movies to know what to do: barricade myself and stay calm. But the knot in my stomach told me this wasn't going to be enough. I had to get upstairs. I ran as fast as I could to the second floor. Once in the bedroom, I locked the door and then realized I hadn't brought my phone with me. It was still downstairs, in the kitchen, where I'd left it while preparing dinner. I knew I couldn't risk going back down there now. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind racing. I needed to call the police, but I had no way to do it. I stepped toward the window and cautiously pulled the curtain aside. I couldn't see him anymore, but I felt his presence. And then I saw it, his shadow, lingering outside the house. He was still there, watching me. He hadn't moved. He was waiting. There was a landline phone in the bedroom, so I quickly picked it up and dialed 911. The operator answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? I told her what was happening, trying to stay as calm as possible. She assured me that the police would be there as soon as possible, but the words did little to soothe my nerves. I heard footsteps in the distance, the soft, rhythmic sound of someone walking around the house. I could hear him moving closer, closer, as if he were circling the house looking for a way inside. My heart raced, each footstep making it beat faster. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the stairs. He was coming up. He was coming for me. My body froze as I held my breath, praying for the police to arrive in time. Just as I thought he was about to reach the door, I heard the distant wail of a police siren. The sound was faint at first, but it grew louder. Relief flooded over me. I wasn't going to be alone with him. I wasn't going to be the next victim. The sound of the siren seemed to startle the man, and I heard him quickly retreating, running toward the back of the house. I could hardly believe it. I stayed in the bedroom, listening to the sirens as they got closer. The police arrived shortly after. I opened the door for them, my legs shaking uncontrollably as I explained what had happened. They checked the perimeter of the house and found no sign of forced entry. There were no signs of the man. He had disappeared into the night. The officers said they would file a report, but there wasn't much they could do. No evidence, no prints, no way to identify him. They told me that he could have been a random intruder, or worse, someone who knew we were alone. Either way, he was gone. Weeks went by and I tried to get back to some sense of normalcy. Rachel returned home and we moved on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. We moved to a new house a few months later, far from the small town where we had lived. I was glad to leave that place behind, but the thought of that masked man still haunted me. He was never found, and I couldn't help but wonder, was he still out there, watching? Or had he been waiting for the perfect moment to strike again? Every time I hear a siren in the distance now, my heart skips a beat. Because I know one thing for sure, that night wasn't a coincidence. It was Halloween night in 2009. I was a university student back then, and my family had gone out of town for a few days. I was home alone. Our house was in a pretty rural area. The closest neighbor was about 150 to 200 meters away, and they were an elderly woman. I liked the quiet, but that night, the solitude felt different. It was as if something was off. After making myself dinner, I sat down in front of the TV. The town was fully in the Halloween spirit, people walking around in costumes, kids going door to door for candy. But I had no interest in going out. Events like that weren't really my thing. Around midnight, I walked to my bedroom to grab something. When I glanced out the window, I saw a figure. Standing at the edge of my yard was a masked man. At first I thought, it's just someone in a costume. It was Halloween after all, but something about him was off. His posture, his stillness, and the way he was staring at me, it sent a chill down my spine. I tried to brush it off, telling myself, just a Halloween prankster. But those eyes, staring out from behind the mask, unsettled me. Then it hit me, the town legend of Mr. Zombie Resard. The stories claimed he would appear every Halloween night, wandering the town. No one ever talked to him. He just watched. Some believed he was a ghost, others thought he was just a prankster. But at that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if the legend was true. The figure eventually moved, walking away from the edge of my yard. I felt a bit of relief, but I couldn't shake the unease. Grabbing my phone, I called my best friend, Ethan. He was way more into local legends and creepy stories than I was. After a few rings, he picked up. "Oliver, what's up? Everything okay?" he said, his voice groggy. "Ethan, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think I just saw Mr. Zombie Resard," I said, my voice trembling. Ethan's tone immediately changed. "Resard? Are you joking? You know he's just a town legend, right?" "I don't know, Ethan. Maybe he is. But I just saw a masked man standing at the edge of my yard, staring at me. It wasn't normal. I swear it was him." Ethan went quiet for a moment before saying, "All right, Oliver. Here's the thing. The stories say Resard rarely interacts with people, but those who make eye contact with him, weird things happen. Just be careful, man. These kinds of legends don't usually end well." After hanging up, I was even more on edge. Trying to calm myself, I thought, it's just a Halloween prank, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. As the night went on, I checked the window again. The man had returned. This time he was closer, standing inside my yard. I quickly locked the bedroom door and turned off all the lights in the house. I thought about calling the police, but felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness. It felt like no matter what I did, this man, or whatever he was, would find me. My heart pounded as I tried to stay calm, but then I heard it. A creak, faint but distinct. It was coming from inside the house. My chest tightened as I realized he had made it inside. I could hear his slow, deliberate footsteps. They echoed through the house, growing louder as they approached the stairs. Ethan's words echoed in my head. Those who make eye contact with him, weird things happen. What did that mean? What was going to happen to me? The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. I saw a shadow move under the door. He was standing there. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze. But he didn't try to open the door. The shadow lingered for a few moments, then moved away. His footsteps receded, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. At dawn, I stepped outside to check. There was no trace of him, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if he had never been there, but I knew what I had seen. Legends aren't always just stories. That night, I became a believer in the tale of Mr. Zombie Resard. What he wanted, why he came, I may never know. But I'll never forget the way he stared at me through that mask. 15 to 16 years passed, and I never saw him again. Now I have a family with 2 children. On a hot spring day in 2012, the land of Arizona was as harsh and hot as usual. With the news of my uncle's death, a void had formed inside me. John was a cheerful, calm man, someone who lived in his own world. Losing him felt like an emptiness. But I had to come to this house for this very reason. He had some money and investments that I was supposed to collect and take to his wife. So, with his death, the emptiness I felt turned into a burden. I was here only to collect the money and leave. I opened the door to the house. When I stepped inside, everything was as it had been. Only the dust on the walls and the shadows seemed a little darker. I was alone, in the house, by myself. Or was I? My eyes wandered across the old belongings in the corner of the room, and something inside me whispered, "Hurry up, get it over with." But at the same time, there was something else in the house. A feeling. Something about my uncle's lost voice. But I tried not to get caught up in it, and made my way straight to the shed. The shed was in the narrow space behind the house, the place where my uncle had accumulated everything over the years. In the dim light, the sound of metal coins clinking between old shelves and boxes filled the air. I had to rummage a bit to find the money. The floor was cold and dusty. After moving a few boxes, I found an old bag in the back. Inside it were some cash, an old passport, a few investment papers. My uncle had really saved up, but why? Why was he so silent, so mysterious? I decided to take the money and documents and head back to the house. But something had changed inside. It was as if everything was filled with a deeper silence. The echoes of my footsteps seemed to reverberate in a different way off the walls of my uncle's house. It was like something was watching me. I quickly decided to take a shower. As the water warmed my back, I suddenly heard something in the background. My uncle's old chair creaked. I was alone, but I distinctly heard that sound in my ears. I quickly tuned my ears, but there was nothing. The walls of the house were just as they had been. Could it really be that simple? After finishing the shower and putting on fresh clothes, I still felt uneasy. Something inside me told me I wasn't alone in this house. I slowly made my way to the bedroom. My eyes drifted to the old chair and table in the corner of the room. I noticed the chair was a little closer. It wasn't very obvious, but it was my uncle's favorite chair. For a moment, I heard a rustling sound. It was as if someone was trying to enter the room, but I was still alone. I told myself not to panic. I quickly lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. But there was something. I could feel it. Was it my uncle's voice? Or was my mind playing tricks on me? When I opened my eyes, the lights were still on. But that feeling, that presence, it was still there. A voice behind me, a whisper. Something watching me. It felt as if my uncle was there, but I couldn't see him. Though what I've told you may sound simple, that day I felt my uncle's presence there with me. It's been almost 13 years since that day, but every time I tell this story, I still shudder.